And can you guys see this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So welcome to our last Power BI user group of 2021. Tonight we are switching things up a little bit, so we will have our welcome and introductions like we typically do, and then instead of having the feature updates first, we are going to have our feature presentation, who is Mark from Zebra BI, who you do see on camera. Then his presentation will be about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we have Q&A, and he does have like a little surprise for us at the end if time allows. Then we will go into the feature updates from September and October with Graham, and then our wrap up at the end. So if you guys, I can't see the cameras right now, so maybe I'll stop sharing, but if you guys wanted to do introductions, you can share your name, the company that you work for, the industry that you're in, and then a recent BI challenge that you've worked through. Is there anybody that wanted to go?
I can go, might as well.
Okay, sure.
Do it quick. I'm Daryl Moffat. I live in Sacramento, California. I've been using Power BI for about a couple of years. My biggest challenge is people adopting to it. I mean, I've actually showed some really neat stuff and they like it. This is great. That's the last time they look at it. It's like, you know, I just find that the adoptability is really my struggle, but I'm getting there. It's coming lately, but because I've been able to do some neat stuff. But I work directly with our ERP system with SQL Server and things like that. So that's it.
Nice.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I can go next. My name's Sam Kelly. I work for Talon. I am a senior consultant here on our data and analytics team. Focus mainly on Power BI, but definitely have experience in a bunch of areas. My most recent challenge in BI with Power BI in particular is getting around the limitations of a non-premium environment when trying to do a lot of data transformation in data flows. Sort of my solution to it is really a workaround, but I've broken my data flows into many pieces that all sort of chain together. While not being, you know, the correct implementation, it gets the job done in an environment where we don't have another option. So that's what I'm going with for now. And yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Hopefully you get through that.
I hope so too.
I guess I'll go next. My name is Graham Atkinson. I'm also a senior consultant with Talon. I've been working with Power BI since it gained popularity. Must have been, what, 5 years back now? So a long time. Sam and I have both kind of been with it since the start. And recent challenges, hard to say. There's always challenges every day. There's a new challenge, but also, you know, it's great working with Power BI and working with different clients and different people, seeing what different people are trying to get out of the software and out of the system. So I think if I were to put a challenge, I'd just say I'm working right now with a number of different clients, and they're all doing vastly different things. So switching gears between those is always a challenge.
Awesome. Thanks, Graham. Is there anybody else that wanted to go that is non-Talon? Mark, you can go in a minute. I'll put your slide up, and then we'll transition. No? Okay. And then Mark, you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I'll just snatch the screen from you.
Sure.
So, hi, greetings everyone, also from my side. I'm Mark Leskovšek from Zebra BI, and we are actually a company specializing in data visualization. Specifically, we are creating visualizations for Excel and Power BI, mainly focused on IBCS compliant reporting solutions. So let's jump in. So for the agenda for today would be just a quick introduction to IBCS, so International Business Communication Standards, and then we'll tackle some elements of actionable reporting. And then in the third part, we'll jump into Power BI and build some quick examples with the tools. And during this third part, yes, feel free to jump in and ask your questions if something, if I'm moving too fast, because there's a lot of things to cover today. Yes, just jump in, and then of course we'll have a dedicated Q&A session, but usually time is not our friend, so hopefully we'll have enough time for the Q&A. Okay, so let's move on. So actionable reporting and what it's all about, right? Let's first try to understand the concept of actionable reporting, because nowadays we collect and store a lot of business data, but as we do so, we encounter the challenge of presenting it, understanding it, and then making it fast right decisions, right? And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to introduce a new way of thinking, and this is actionable reporting, the new paradigm, right? Because the three pillars of actionable reporting are actually driving smarter decisions. So not focusing only on meaningful insights about what happened, why it happened, when it happened, but also what to do next, right? And the second pillar is clarity, right? By including the IBCS standards, you will achieve that clarity and consistency across the whole organization. But this sounds like a simple thing to do, but in reality, it is quite hard to do. So the last pillar then is ease of use. And as Daryl said, because Power BI sometimes seems so much jumping from Excel to Power BI or from other like well-known tools of reporting or PowerPoint slides or something like that, people tend to avoid adoption, right? And here the third pillar is this ease of use. Like, it refers more to the technical side, so creating reports in a simple and better way, and as well for the business side by driving and improving that so-called data culture that we all talk about, right? So let's talk about quickly about information design and the inspiration behind IBCS, right? Because people use all sorts of consistent data representation across different areas. So for example, if we take a look at maps, right? Immediately from the use of blue color, you can analyze this map and see, okay, yes, this is a body of water, and we have some green here for vegetation, and we then have a different notation for roads and different elements of the map, right? And also because we have strictly said that north is always up and south is bottom, east and west is left and right respectively, we can easily read the patterns of the map and navigate quickly, right? And same can be said for traffic signs. So wherever you go in the world, you are quickly able to act upon those signs. So for example, even if you see the stop sign from the back, you will immediately know the meaning and understand it, right? Same can be said then for music. Like, music notation has been developed for hundreds of years, and now it's easy for musicians and composers to read and write music, because they don't have to figure out a way of how to best represent this data, right? It's all standardized, everyone understands this, and they can then be creative in the right way. But what about business, right? If you Google sales dashboard or financial dashboard, you get all sorts of different color schemes, different reporting systems, different software even, and logic behind how to represent the data. And this is actually troublesome, because if you want to analyze patterns and have clarity when viewing data, you want to have everything look the same if it means the same, right? So here come IBCS standards into play. So International Business Communication Standards, of which also the founding member of Zebra BI, our CEO actually is the founding member of IBCS standards as well. But just to explain what it tackles. So there are some rules for messages, for titles, how we should represent time and structure, how we should show time periods, which charts to use in which scenarios, how to label your data so it's clear, so it's not too many labels, not too little. Then, as I said, you want to keep the same meaning and the same data visualization for scenarios. So, for example, if we are presenting actual, forecasted, or planned data, it must always look the same, so you don't have to dig in for that information to see what's happening, right? And you want to be able to highlight the variances because that is where all the action is actually happening. So the variances to your comparison measures, to your targets, to plans, and stuff like that. And the 9th point here is one of the maybe most overlooked. So because if you do not scale the same elements or the same categories that you show on a dashboard, you can quickly get a skewed view of your performance. And then the last element here is you want to, of course, highlight the biggest changes or certain areas of your dashboards. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of a typical sales dashboard done in Power BI using different visualizations and breakdowns, right? And we start with, of course, our slicer pane at the top. Well, then we have our time periods. We have our KPIs here, sales, profit, and quantity. And then we have our breakdowns by geographical maps, donut charts, tree maps, then some column and area charts, right? But okay, you might think, yes, this is a really nice dashboard. It has lots of colors. It has a lot of apparent information density. But can it answer some simple questions like, is my sales performance good or bad? How good or how bad is it? Why is it so? And what are we going to do about it? Because this is the main goal of such a dashboard, right? Then we can see, okay, so is my sales performance good or bad? Okay, I see my numbers. It's 1.9 million approximately, and we're profitable. But what if we said, okay, this year's goals for profit was actually 300,000, right, dollars. So immediately I'm missing this information, right? And then if we try to analyze it further, right, we have this donut chart here that has some elements in the sorted by volume, and again here the tree map sorted by volume. But apart from that, we don't get much information from here. So it's taking a lot of this space. So a quarter of the dashboard is actually used for really not that much information. Then we analyze the colors, right? Here we use green color for California. Here we use green color for office machines. Here it's used for sales, and here for furniture. So there's no consistent meaning, so we don't even know what green color means. It's probably just used for design purposes, like to make it more beautiful. And this is simply not the right way to do it. And again, when you're trying to analyze data in some sort of time frames, you usually analyze it in a horizontal way. So this is correct. So you would go from January to February or any sort of time trends you would analyze in a horizontal plane. But using this as on structure, it can completely misinterpret or even take a completely skewed view of what is going on, because a line chart here will not make much sense, right? Because we have here a structure. So let's see how we can reorganize this to make much more sense and immediately from the patterns and the design of the dashboard, draw some conclusions and answer the questions that we have here. So immediately we see that there's a lot less color, and this is by design, because we want to keep the main elements and the focus on the message, right? And the message here is my sales performance good or bad? Immediately you can see the deviation from the plan, and it is 1.1 million below the plan, and it jumps into your view, and it's your focus is driven to it because it's red color, right? And again, you can see the majority of the colors here in the trend chart and the variances is red. So you can subconsciously analyze this and see, okay, yes, we are moving actually in a downward trend compared to a previous year or a plan here. Then with the advanced visualization of waterfall charts here, this is again a really good chart to be used when we're analyzing variances, because it keeps our focus where it's needed. So we get the answer for is my sales performance good or bad? We get the exact amount, how good and how bad is it? And then we can analyze the breakdown as we have it in a nice vertical way by structure here. We can see that this is some sort of retail operation, and it's separated by chain, sorted by volume, and then also by category. And immediately we can see, okay, so my performance is below the plan, and you can immediately guess that it's probably coming from this women's category that is an outlier, because you can see it visualized in this integrated chart in the table. So then, so what are we going to do about it? From this amount of data, it might not still be apparent. So in this case, you would then go and construct some sort of a report page tooltip or drill through to dig into this women's category and see what in that category is actually causing the below performance, and from the entire context, you would be able to answer that question, hopefully. So this next example tackles that issue of scaling, right? If you have the small multiples functionality here, you can visualize your different categories here, or the entire group of categories in a meaningful way. And because you have, let me just switch to a pointer, because you have a visual representation of the volume, you can immediately also discern that the higher row here has much more impact on your business outcome than the lower ones. If this was all on the same scale and all would go to this height, all charts would go to the maximum height, you would have a hard time seeing this. But in this way, you can just analyze it quickly, find the patterns, again, see that the women's category is consistently underperforming below the plan. And from the top 5 categories, only the home category is actually above the plan. And this is something that can be analyzed quickly, and then you can, of course, make faster and smarter decisions. So let's take a quick look at another example of a sales dashboard, which is typically done in Power BI. So we get, again, our KPIs here. So yes, we have our gross margin, but we are missing the targets and or some sort of plan forecast. And this gauge or speedometer visualization, what does it actually want to tell you? So the main story here is this, right? The gap from the target. So there's a much better way of showing this. And also, okay, this is maybe the most elements that I would use in a donut chart or a pie chart. But again, it is much easier to compare bar or column charts in height than it is elements in a donut chart. And again, if we're comparing the categories in this way, it is really hard to tackle this problem. In this kind of scenario, when you're comparing your actual data to plan, again, you want to visualize that gap. This is the important part. And again, if you're looking at the tree map, this could be much better visualized. So the same data then visualized in a more meaningful way. So we have our KPIs at the top, we can see our targets, we can also add additional information because of that freed up space, and we can actually have better information density on our dashboards by removing unnecessary elements of the dashboards. So here we have those chains again separated, but we can now see the actual volume comparisons, and we also get those very important variances and movements from your targets. Okay, so this is just the let's say the main logic of IBCS, but this next section should really be interactive. So feel free to raise a hand or unmute yourself and ask questions. But in any case, I hope we should have some spare time for questions at the end, right? Okay, so let's see what are the key elements of that actionable reporting. So the first two would be advanced charts, such as the waterfall charts and maybe segmented charts. And the next would be variance analysis. So let's see how quickly we can build this in Power BI. And let's jump into Power BI right now. Okay, so we have here the Zebra BI tables and Zebra BI charts. And what I'll do right now is I'll bring in my business units, my actual data, and then I'll bring in some targets, previous year and plan. And what you can see now is that Zebra BI automatically generates additional columns. So let me just make this a little bit smaller. It generates those variance columns automatically. And besides that previous year and plan here, you have the notation applied, which is standard. So if I now switch to a chart type here in the columns, I will see that I have a consistent representation by IBCS, so for the plan, for the actuals, for previous year, and I have those variances. But if I want to now quickly switch this to maybe a different chart type or just show the numbers, as you can see, I can go into the column settings and switch it around. I can then drag and drop those columns around and place them as I see fit. I can then visualize and maybe highlight the important parts. So for example, let's say the comparison to plan is more important than to previous year. I can highlight it as such quickly, and then I will maybe I don't want to see the comparisons to previous year. So what you can do here is just hide the columns here and say, okay, this is fine for me. Let's just change the background fill here as well. And let's say, okay, this is now fine. And for example, okay, we want to increase the density even more here. So instead of just displaying the previous year and plan side by side like this, I can choose on the actuals column, which I can of course also rename any way I would like. I can choose this overlapped bar chart type. And now I will display the previous year markers and the plan on the same here column. And it is also, as you can see, it is also scaled across the visual. So everything here in the visual is scaled between each other. And what you can do here now is, okay, we have this overlapped bar chart, so maybe we don't need the plan, we don't need the previous year, and now we have our visualization. This can be done really quickly. Okay. And for example, if I want to switch now here and see the outliers, or maybe just see the forecast numbers. So if I want the default notation for forecast, I can just bring this any sort of number into the forecast placeholder brackets. But here you can place any type of measure into those buckets. But those placeholder brackets are just here to set the default notation set by the standards, right? And in this case, okay, we bring in the forecast, and now, as you can see, the notation has changed. The chart here has as well changed. But what if I now want to compare the plan to forecast, or have a different set of rules here? I can quickly change the automatic calculations between those comparison measures. So for example, I'm comparing forecast to plan. You will see, okay, now this has changed, and I've also changed the notation, and the user will immediately now know that this is actually the forecast that is being compared. Okay, but let's move a few steps back now. So let's bring in this to a sort of visualization. Usually when you have this done, you can say, okay, this is fine for me, but I want to maybe just have a view of the data in a table, right? And I can use this chart slider to have two separate views of the same visual. So I can have it as an integrated view with those visualizations and charts, or I can display all the data in a table way. But again, in this separate view, I can again choose to transform some of the columns and maybe hide them, or maybe create like a really big cross table. So for example, if I want to add in here a hierarchy on the add in a hierarchy on the columns as well. So I would analyze all my numbers across those categories. As you can see, I've created some groups here. I can hide then the unnecessary columns from all the groups, or just a single group. So for example, I would hide everything else except for the comparisons to plan here. And then I can quickly collapse the first 3 quarters here and just analyze the last quarter, maybe add in the grand total, highlight it as well. And I have a really like big and cross table with all the details of my data here. Okay, but usually this is something that goes later on in report creations. Let's try to now complement this table with some sort of a advanced trend chart. So again, we'll use the charts here, but what we'll do here, we'll just add some sort of time frame here, so the months, and then we'll place our actual values. And Zebra BI will automatically generate the most appropriate chart, but you of course have different chart options here. So what happens now if I add in a comparison measure and maybe another one here? I will get again the automatic calculations for the variances, and both visuals are responsive. So if I make it smaller, it will still be legible because it will absorb the data. But if I make it a bit bigger, I can show all the information here. I can then change the labels just by clicking on them. So I can switch between absolute, relative, or both variances, also on the highlight here, difference highlight. And I have different chart options now. So if this is not my desired view, I can change here with this chart slider and move into a different chart option, expand it here, have an area chart, line charts, pin charts. So pretty much all the business charts that are really readable and understandable and can be compared between each other. But maybe, okay, I don't want this responsive design, so I want to keep some part of this visualization, but I want to keep it regardless of the size. So I can enforce certain layouts in the settings. So I go into the layouts here and I can just say I want to see the integrated variance and make it small like this, or I want to just see the absolute variances, an actual with relative. And this is now a trend chart that can be then complemented with this detailed table here. I would just maybe just add in a slicer here, maybe for quarters, and place it at the top. So, okay, now maybe it's not appropriate to use that slicer to filter the trend chart. So what I can quickly do here is just format the interactions here, edit it, and say that it should not filter this chart here. So now I can filter the details table by the quarter, or I can, of course, use the cross-filtering design here and filter the data by clicking on the charts. So this is a simple example that we can do from those two elements of actionable reporting. So let's move on now here. So the next element that can be really used is the small multiples functionality that I was showing you before for the scaling. So once we have this, we can use, maybe let's just duplicate this page here and remove this. So once we have the charts here, we can separate them by different groups. So for example, I want to just add in my business units here into the groups. And let's keep this responsive design here. And now I've essentially created multiples of that same type of chart across all my business units. And as you can immediately see, the bottom units don't really generate as much volume as the top ones, right? But they do so if we combine them. But how we can do this? So I'll show you really quickly. We can go to the small multiple settings here and turn on the top n plus others. So we can set the number of items. So let's say we'll set the top 5 items and all the rest should jump into this others category, which again, we have this option of highlighting, which is also important if we want to highlight to maybe tell that this is some sort of different data. You can now highlight this and you can increase or decrease the number of other items that are absorbed into this visualization. And from this view, you have this option also to jump into the stack chart view. So stack charts are usually really tricky to visualize because you have those large legends that are actually not readable and you have too many elements. But with this top n plus others functionality so easily added to the visualization, you can really easily just decrease the number of those elements and make your stack charts a bit more readable and make it so. And again, for your end users, you want to be able to have some sort of control of interaction. So maybe you don't want your end users to have to see maybe some of those chart options. So what you can do here is you can hide those chart options just by clicking this icon here, and the end users won't then, once the report is published, be able to do some sort of mistake, for example. But you have all sorts of interaction controls under the interaction tab, so you can control the chart slider and different sorts of options. So in this view here, maybe if you want to analyze a specific variance, right? You can do it either by clicking on the group and then just moving between the groups to see it, or you can break the scaling just for to be able to analyze the variances a bit more closely, just by clicking on this axis. All right, so this is one of the elements that small multiples can be used, but you can also use those small multiples to maybe show different KPIs. So for example, here we have a breakdown by KPIs, and we also can see that we have a breakdown by some time periods, so calculations by month or the whole year to date. And if I now see here, I have my costs displayed as a positive value. An increasing cost is a positive value, and this is of course not the correct representation. So what I can quickly do here is I can right click on the row and invert those costs, and now they are correctly displayed. And I can do the same with the small multiples. So if I throw in here into the group the KPIs, I can invert a single group here, and now I have the costs displayed in a correct way. Okay, and the next two elements of actionable reporting are actually the report page tooltips and top plus bottom end functionality. So let's jump into Power BI again and see how we can leverage those. Okay, so usually the tooltips should really be limited to the amount of data that they are displayed. They're not meant to show you a complete report when opening the tooltips. So what we can do now here is we've created a breakdown by the countries, but there's a lot of countries here, right? And if we just move back to this view, a comparison by absolute variance.
Mark, sorry to interrupt you. It sounds like Daryl can't see your screen. I can see it myself, but would you mind unsharing and then resharing to see if that fixes this issue?
Yes, absolutely. Can you see the screen right now?
I can. Daryl, how about you? And maybe he'll say something in the chat. Yes,
okay,
he can see
excellent,
it. Perfect.
Excellent.
I can see it, no problem.
Okay, so I'll try to speed this up because we have still a lot of stuff to cover here. Hopefully this is still, you're still able to track alongside. So again, we can use the top plus bottom end functionality here to just see our biggest outliers. So for example, I want to show my top and bottom 6 elements, and all the rest should be gathered into the others. And now I can use this tooltip for maybe a landing page. So we have our landing page here with our different costs here. And because we have this invert option, right, I can also show the costs in a meaningful way. So if I filter now let's just close this edit interaction. So if I now filter my data by costs, you can see that an increasing cost is represented as a bad thing, right? And this is how it should be. But here on the tooltips, we see that we have this nice tooltip by breakdown to comparison to plan, but an increasing cost is here displayed as a good thing, which is not correct. So what we can do, again, we can move to the tooltip. Just let's sort it like this, and let's just throw the KPIs into the groups placeholder. Let's invert the costs, and let's move back now. So now if we filter it by gross profit, an increase in gross profit is of course a positive thing, but let's say we filter it by costs, an increase. I think I'm using the wrong tooltip here. So yes, let's just switch to this new tooltip that we just created. Okay, so now an increasing cost is also displayed as a bad thing in the tooltip. And if I switch to the gross profit here or to the revenue, an increase should be displayed as a good thing. So this is how you can leverage those two functionalities. So the top end plus others functionality combined with the tooltip. But Okay, then the next thing would be, of course, to maybe add a drill through functionality. It can be done with a button to just make it more intuitive for those users just getting to know with Power BI, or you can, of course, use the default right click and drill through into this mobile unit. And again, you want to use those consistent naming of titles. So if I, for example, here filter the data, I want to also represent this with a dynamic title that can be done in Power BI, of course, to know what I'm actually showing here. And in this way, you can create a really meaningful. Yes, Daryl, you asked a question here. So Zebra BI can be the top and plus others functionality can be done with some complex decks, but it's usually hard to implement it in a dynamic and really nice way like this. But here you can also keep this for the end user. So you can, on the visual itself, you can increase and decrease the number of top and plus other elements. So this gives you more flexibility when trying to display this and in a meaningful way. And as you can see, this view and everything is all standardized, and it's once you implement this, everyone will be looking at the same patterns, and it's much easier to understand what is going on. Okay, so let's keep moving on because we are really short on time here. So the next two elements would be, and this is something that is really exciting, and Zebra BI really makes a big leap, is when we're trying to represent financial statements. So adding certain elements or certain rows to your visualizations can be a little bit tricky in Power BI. And also the commenting solution can be done with maybe text boxes and matrices. But what we've done with Zebra here is if we jump into the financial statement. So we have here a Zebra BI tables and just a basic account structure for our accounts here, two-level account structure. It can be more, of course. We support unlimited hierarchies in this regard. And we have this waterfall chart view of the P&L statement here. But as you can see, your costs are again displayed as a positive number, and this is the correct way actually, because it's much more manageable to have all your numbers in as a positive number. But again, we can leverage the invert function to match now the plan comparisons to plan, and also the waterfall to jump into place. And we know that the gross margin is the result of costs and revenue, so we can also mark it as such. So we'll mark it as a result here. But now the tricky part is here adding an additional element. So as you can see, we have the operating income and net income here expressed as a percentage on the row level. And again, we can do this with the gross margin. So we can go and add a new formula completely on the visual level that is not in our model. And here I'll just add in my gross margin as a percent. I'll use this and calculate it between the elements, format it as a percent, maybe make it blue to stand out, save it. And in any case, if I want to keep track of those formulas that I have this Manage Formulas button, and I can see which formulas are then used here, which are custom formulas, and I can format them, delete them, and manage them. So, okay, I have my gross margin here. I forgot to click save, so let's write it again. Margin, revenue, percent. Let's make it blue color and add. And now I've added a completely new element on the visual level itself. So if I now add in the next maybe important part of the insightful information here, it's the comments. So if we have this placeholder bucket here, And we can just simply connect any Excel table or store our comments in a data warehouse or any external source, but just link it maybe to your account structure and your time frame, so we can then filter them. So we now add those comments to the comments placeholder, and as you can see, we get those comment displayed on the visual. But maybe this is not enough. Maybe we want to display the comments in straight away for that top level view, and we can simply turn on the comment box and we will get those what we call smart comments. So we get the entered comments in below this title that is automatically generated from your data. And now, if this is all dynamic, so if I switch to a different time frame, go to maybe March, I'll get different comments. If I switch to a different structure of accounts, so maybe to our balance sheet, I'll get the comments for the balance sheet. And I have this, and as you can see, I have the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement all in one visualization here. And again, with some tricks here, you can switch between month-to-date calculations or year-to-date calculations with a dynamic switch. So just like this. Okay. And now the last two parts would be, of course, you want to be able to customize those to your corporate structure, because yes, having the IBCS applied is fine, but usually we get requests such as keeping the design colors the same, or you want to maybe change the different default names of the columns here, and you can simply do this by importing or changing the theme, the JSON theme here. So you'll go into this view and just browse for the theme, and you can create such a JSON theme, and just from the theme editor that we provide at Zebra BI. And you can set pretty much all the settings of both visuals here, all the colors, the naming of the columns. And once you've done with your editing, you can just save this file and just open it here and bring it into Power BI. So let's see what happens. And now we've applied this corporate theme, changed some column names, and we have it all ready for publishing. So yes, these are maybe the key elements. One more thing to show, and of course you also want to make sure that you design your reports for the end user, right? And this was an example of a sales dashboard, but maybe also a financial statement. But of course you can have those executive summaries that are tailored to the high-level management, and again, there the comments will be most likely appreciated. And also, you want to be able to add those maybe segmented charts. So, for example, if you do not have the data that is, so for example, we have our actual data up to September here, but then we have our forecast and plan values. So we still want to be able to see in which direction we are going, right? And if you have your forecast and plan values, then and you will still get the display of those variances. So you'll see in what direction you're going. Are you actually going to hit your targets, hit your marks? And once that actual data gets populated, it will of course then show also on the charts. Okay, so I'd like to leave still some time for the Q&A session. So fire away, but just to keep in mind, the most important thing is to make your dashboards and your reports first understandable and of course actionable.
I have a general question around the Zebra BI tool. Is it possible to apply theming from like a JSON file like you would for Power BI to Zebra BI visualizations here?
Yes, but of course you can. You can use the themes and just copy those elements, so certain structures from the team. So you can just copy that structure from the Zebra BI team and place it into your existing team, and it should work just as fine. And one thing to note, so the visuals are Power BI certified. So what this means is they act the same as they would native visuals. Right?
Gotcha.
And so you can export it to PowerPoints, PDFs, embed them in reports and work with them as you would with any other native visuals.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Okay, hopefully, hopefully this was all interesting to you. But in any case, as we do have some more time, if there are no questions, I would ask if we could stop the recording and maybe we can show a sneak peek of what is yet to come. So if you all agree, Gina?
All right. Are we good to go again, Gina? Are we recording?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to cover, as we do in every one of our Power BI user group meetings, is the new feature update summary for the last few months. So today I'm going to be going over the months of September and October. The list of updates isn't really long for both those months, so this won't take the usual amount of time, but I just have two PowerPoint slides here going over September and then October, and then I have a quick demo of some of the features that I can show off in Power BI Desktop. So in the month of September, starting off in the reporting section, a whole overhaul was done on the format for buttons that can be inserted into a report. So if you download the latest report, you might have noticed that there's a large number of things that you can now do with buttons that were impossible in the past. The least of which is changing the shape of a button, but you can now also create groups of buttons for page navigation, for bookmark navigation. And I'll show that. That's pretty cool. And then you can change like hover and click action for buttons. So if you hover over a button, you can have it change color, or you can change shape. You can have it glow a certain color. The interactions with buttons is now pretty advanced. You can really customize how your buttons look and feel in a Power BI report. You can now toggle on and off the total columns in waterfall charts in Power BI. So previously, a waterfall chart would be a summation of any number of pieces of a total, and then that total would be the entire line that takes up the whole visual from the bottom to the top. They've turned off, or they've given you the option to turn off that total if the data that you're trying to represent perhaps doesn't have a total or doesn't make sense to show a total. For line chart visuals, they've added series labels. So this is actually something that I have been wanting for a long time. They've always had kind of a legend label so that you can have a blue, green, and a red line, and then you can have at the top of the visual there'd be the color blue corresponds to a certain piece of data, red corresponds, and green corresponds to something else. But that always forced the user to look at the shapes in the visual, look at the lines, figure out what is which color, and then look at the legend. There's kind of a disconnect there. They now have the option to put the label directly on top of the line, which makes it a whole lot easier to understand just from a glance what the lines are trying to show. And then the final thing in the reporting section here is sensitivity labels. So sensitivity labels are something that Power BI has been working with over the past few months to add to Power BI desktop files and to the service. And in this month's update, they added sensitivity labels to Power BI template files. So these are PBIT files. Normally, when you save a Power BI desktop report, you're saving it as a PBIX, but you also have the option to save it as a PBIT. And when you save it as a PBIT, you are saving it separate from the data source. When you open up that file, you'll be asked how you want to connect to a data source, and then it will load the data. Just a quick overview on what the difference between the PBIX and PBIT is, but what they've changed this month is allowing you to apply a sensitivity label to a PBIT file. In the analytics section here, insights, which is something that they've kind of explored in the past, has been added as a preview feature in the service and only the service. So previously there was a Q&A functionality, which still does exist, where you can kind of ask a question of your data. You can type in like plain text, total number of locations that sold more than some amount of goods, or something like that. And it will do its best to analyze what you've typed and give you answers and analysis. It'll usually try to come up with a few graphs that try to explain that question that you've asked. Insights kind of takes that to the next level and gives you those insights into the data and illustrations into what stories can be told from your data without you having to provide any input in the first place. If you publish a Power BI report to the service and then you open that up, on the top ribbon there will be a little light bulb option. And if you have a paid Power BI subscription, so Pro or Premium, you can click that little light bulb and it will open up a pane on the side of the service that will contain insights. So that's a new page that they've added. It is a preview feature, so you would have to enable it. I tried to experiment with this. We at Talon do not have the Pro for the entire tenant, so I wasn't able to create an example for you guys. But from what I could see of their documentation, it looks like it could be pretty cool. And it's something that they're just kind of starting to work with, so I'm excited to see where that goes from here. In the modeling section, just a few small changes. For calculate function, which is a DAX function to calculate some value based on a context, they have added the ability to, for Boolean value in the filter section of the calculate function, to use an aggregate function. I will show kind of what that means in a little bit, but if you do a lot of coding in DAX and you use the calculate function, you may be happy to hear that you don't have to create variables all the time. Now you can just use aggregations within the filter, the actual filter statement. And then secondly, they have made it easier to format data based on a user's location. So those are two examples at the bottom there in the box of dates that are formatted. The first one would format that date time value to English Great Britain. So it would have, let's see, I think they have day, month, year. And then the second format would be formatted to English US, so month, day, year. So depending on that format option that you choose, when you drag a date that's formatted in a certain way into a card or into a table, it would display in the location that you've defined for it. Now you can always override something to display in a certain way from the kind of format chooser. So you can always say, I don't want to specify a location. I instead just want to specify month, day, year. But this would allow you to kind of dynamically define how a date or how some other string of data, decimals, using a decimal point in place of a comma, for instance, as they in Europe, have decimal places where we would use commas. It would allow you to kind of dynamically define that in the statement if you're creating a report that could be used in both the United States and Europe. So the ability to define a location and have the format based on that location is a new flexible feature that we have in the modeling view. Finally, under the service, we have a few preview features that were introduced. So if I go over to Power BI service, so this is the Talon tenant of the Power BI service. I don't have any dashboards or anything up on the screen at the moment, but I have clicked on this little goals tile on the navigation bar. I haven't created any goals, but if I did create goals, I could see kind of KPIs excuse me, KPIs that are listed here that are showing goals that I've defined for my data. Some examples of what those could be are up here. So you could see here, this education sample is saying 45% of K through 12 schools are using ... You know, you would have to define what exactly the goals that you want to track are, but they have added as a preview feature in the month of September the ability to have a status on those goals based on some dynamic condition that you define. So you can have your goals now display as on track, behind schedule, ahead of schedule, you know, set a status that will automatically be displayed when you come view that page. They have also added improved filtering for goals, so you can now filter all of your goals based on their status or based on other conditions such as the data set that they're coming from or what information the goal pertains to. Power BI goals is not something that I've worked a huge amount with, and it's another thing that I was not really able to create a demo for because we don't have access to using Power BI goals. All right, and the last thing under the service here is APIs to determine who has access to what Power BI artifacts. So this is something that they had mentioned back in 2 months ago, I want to say. They had said that they were going to introduce an API to do this, and in September they added a preview feature to do that. So essentially what this is the ability for an admin to use an API to determine who has been granted access to any particular piece of content in Power BI, whether that's a data set, a data flow, a dashboard, a report, you know, anything that you can grant access to, you can now query the Power BI service so that you don't have to click around and see if you can find it. Those are the updates for the month of September. Now, they always on their monthly update blog include a large number of specific updates for visuals and connectors and stuff like that. I take that out of our feature summary, but if you're interested in any of that stuff, you can always find it on the Power BI blog. So quickly moving into the month of October, this list is even shorter, but in reporting for the month of October, the Azure Maps visual, which is still in preview. If you do want to ever use one of their preview features, all you have to do is open the Power BI desktop application, go into options, go into preview features, and find the preview feature that you want to enable and click the checkbox to use that. So the Azure Maps has been in preview for a while now. They recently just added a heat map layer to the Azure Map. So I believe Azure Maps now supports size bubbles, a gradient fill, perhaps I think they have like a pie chart, and now they have a heat map type visual for their layers. An example of that is this large purple map in the bottom right. I would have created a preview of this, but the sample data set that I used to do my previews does not have any latitude, longitude defined locations. It only uses country strings. The Azure map does require you to have a lat long coordinate. There were a few changes made to the preview feature that was introduced a few months ago, the direct query to Power BI datasets and Azure Analysis Services. Quick overview of what that preview feature is. So it would allow you to connect to your Power BI datasets or Azure Analysis Services through direct query rather than import mode, and actually make changes to those datasets so that, in the past, you've always been able to connect to a Power BI dataset, but you've never been able to edit it. In Preview, you can now connect through direct query and actually make changes to those queries. What they've added in the month of October is more flexibility when selecting which tables to pull in from a Power BI dataset. In the past, it was all or nothing. You connected to the dataset, you got the entire dataset. Now you can select a subset of tables from that dataset that you actually want to pull into the report. And there are a number of performance improvements to the direct query added as well. And then the final reporting feature that was added in the month of October was a tenant level setting to switch Bing maps on and off. So the tenant settings in Power BI is a long series of options that admins of the Power BI tenant have the ability to access and switch on or off or enable for certain security groups, etc. This particular one that was just added allows the admin to go into the tenant settings and turn off or turn on Bing maps across the entire organization. So that's it for reporting. In modeling, there were a few minor changes. The first is some performance optimization for switch statements. So if you've ever written a DAX function that uses switch, it's kind of like an if statement, but it has an unlimited number of conditions rather than just 2, based on a value that's determined based on the third argument. The switch statement, now I think they said that you will see better performance if you have over 100 different switch conditions, which I'm sure that not many people have, or if you have a measure used in the value condition. So that one's actually a change that is of interest, certainly to me. I've created some switch statements that were very slow in the past, and the reason is because they used a measure to switch on. So it sounds like they have done some performance optimization for that. They've also added, I think, 5 new DAX functions. So they've added bitwise shift functions, and then bitwise or and exclusive or. So you can now use any of those 5 operations as a DAX function. Then the last section here is for the Power BI service. Deployment pipeline APIs have been made generally available. This was a preview feature from a few months back, similar to the API that we discussed for the month of September. So the API for the Power BI artifacts. The deployment pipeline API gave similar access to see who has been given access to deployment pipelines, who can publish, who can push data from one state to another, and would allow an admin to add or remove people from a pipeline. The risk before this was added was that without having an outside way to do that, it was very possible for somebody to create a pipeline and then either forget about it, maybe leave the company or lose access to it, and then nobody could ever get back into the deployment pipeline. So with that API, admins are able to add or remove people, and that API was made generally available. So when it says generally available here, I should probably define what that means. It means you no longer have to opt into that feature. It's just going to be available out of the box with Power BI. If you go to the service, you will have access to this deployment pipeline API now. And then the final bullet point here is the upcoming automatic installation of the Power BI app for Microsoft Teams. This is actually a really interesting one. So it's not an update that was made in the month of October, but apparently they felt it was important enough to let everybody know that it's coming. Essentially what this will be is when a user goes to the Power BI service for the first time, Teams will install the Power BI application for Teams. So this is an application that allows you to view Power BI content within Teams. This is something that admins can opt out of, so this doesn't happen, but they're trying to make it as easy as possible and as seamless as possible for users to become integrated with Power BI from their natural environments. That's all of the updates that I wanted to cover for September and October. Before I jump into a quick demo for about 10 minutes, are there any questions on any of the things that we just went over? Is everyone still with me? I haven't heard anyone.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Okay, so jumping over into Power BI Desktop, what I usually do is just create a really quick demo using a demo dataset provided by Microsoft. So what I've done here is just create 3 tabs, one for the waterfall chart, one for the line series that I mentioned, in the last 4 buttons. And actually, the first thing that I want to talk about is the optimization that they've given to buttons within Power BI. So you can see as I hover over these buttons, they're actually getting highlighted in red. That's something that was not possible before. And if I go to navigate, it brings me to this button page, which of course is something that was possible, have your buttons control navigation. But what is brand new is the way in which I'm doing that. Previously, you would have to add a button and then set the action. So if I add a new button, this is the button I just added, I go to action and go to navigation, I could set this button to go to one of my other pages. So if I wanted to go to line series, now this button will take me to the line series page when I click on it. So that's always been something that we can do in Power BI. But what we can do now is in Navigator, if I select Page Navigator, it will introduce a series of buttons that are linked dynamically to the pages that I have in the report. You can see there's a button for each page, and if I create a new page, it will add that to my list. So really powerful stuff there. I've always been wanting a feature like this. It certainly takes a lot of the headache out of maintaining a navigation bar in Power BI. You also have the option to customize these basically to your heart's content. You can change the shape of these buttons. You can change what they look like when you hover over them, like I did here, what they look like when they are selected. So if I go to fill and I go to selected, I can change the fill to like blue. And then I can make it so that if you press it, it turns a different color. So I can do all of this different customization for my buttons now that wasn't available in the past. One example that I had here was this question mark. If you hover over it, it'll tell you to give feedback, and when you click, it'll say thanks. And then I have this. This is a bookmark navigation, so similar to page navigation. This is actually navigating between 3 different bookmarks that I have set up in the report. The only difference between those bookmarks is the color of the square on the page. If you're unfamiliar with what bookmarks are kind of report snapshots of what a report looks like. And I've used the selection pane to select only one of the 3 square visuals that I have for each bookmark. Okay. And here's just one last button. So this would be a back button that I've set to when you click on it, it turns red and it sends you back. So the next thing really quickly is the waterfall chart. So on the left is the default waterfall chart. This is what it's always looked like in Power BI. We have our total sales broken down by product. Each of these different segments is a different product, and the total amount of sales is the number. And then on the right, there's a total bar. With the newest overhaul, or I guess just adjustment to the waterfall chart, you can now just remove that, and they've actually hidden that option. If you go into y-axis, down here, there's the show total. So kind of hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for, but you can turn off that total bar for waterfall charts now. And finally, we have our line charts. So this line chart is a running total of sales by product, and these labels on the right side are the new feature available to line charts. And that's the series label feature right here. So I have it toggled on. If it's off, this, I don't really like this because it's really hard to tell the difference between this purple line here, the VTT, and this top purple line, Paseo. And if I had more lines, it could become even harder. We also have similarities between this dark blue and this dark purple. When you add the series labels, it becomes really easy to say, oh, Paseo's at the top here, followed by VTT, and we can track these back and see how those changed over time. It just becomes way easier to analyze. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the measure that I created for running totals. If you're not super familiar with DAX, don't worry too much about this measure, but what I'm doing here is taking advantage of the ability to have an aggregate function in my filter condition. So previously I would have to do something like setting a variable month number equals min month, and then I'd have to reference that variable later on in the calculation. Now I can just do that right here in the filter condition. All right, so that's everything I have for September and October. It's a relatively short list this month, but some nice changes. Anybody have any questions about anything I covered? Sounds like a no. All right, everyone. Well, that's it for me. I'll hand it over to Gina, Sam, if you want to wrap it up, either one.